morning. Welcome to the Los Angeles World Affairs Council and Town Hall. I'm Kim McClary, President and CEO, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to today's program. Please stay tuned to the end of this program for an update on our upcoming programs, both in person and live stream. We are also introducing new member benefits, which includes exclusive programming, access to our unique film screening. So if you're not a member, please consider joining. It's a terrific way to support this organization. You can find out about becoming a member at our website at lawacth.org. For those of you who would like to ask our distinguished panelists today a question, there's a control panel on the right-hand side of your screen where you can type in your questions. Jessica DeGanzik, our Vice President of Events, will be managing your questions during the Q&A portion of today's program. We'll hope to get to the questions in about 35 minutes. It is now my great pleasure to introduce today's program. Quarantine fatigue, travel in a post-pandemic world. I'm looking forward to today's live stream on this post-pandemic travel issue and our remarkable panel of travel industry executives who have their pulse on what's currently happening in domestic and international travel, especially with the Delta variant. It's my pleasure to welcome today's panelists. Deanna Austin, Executive Vice President and Chief Commercial Officer at Princess Cruises. Dr. Zhihang, Vice President and General Manager for Air China North America. Justin Erbacci, Chief Executive Officer for Los Angeles World Airports, which includes Los Angeles International Airport. Janet Moore, owner of Distant Horizons, an educational travel company. Our moderator for today's timely talk is Catharine Hamm, a travel journalist who served as the Los Angeles Times travel editor for 2 decades. Everyone, let's please welcome Catharine, our moderator, and she will bring on today's panelists. Hi, Catharine. We're so pleased to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Kim. And I'm excited to be here. This program has changed and morphed since we first began talking about it, just as the situation has changed and morphed. We've had a number of things that have improved and some things that have not. And so really trying to capture what the broader picture is a little bit, as we used to say in journalism, like trying to nail Jell-O to a tree. It is not easy to know what will happen. But to begin with, I'd like to start by asking each of the panelists what has happened in their industry. And I asked them earlier to do this in 5 words or less. So we're not going to be counting your words, but we certainly want to make sure that we leave plenty of time for other questions and audience interactions. So Justin, I'd like to start with you. What has the last 15, 16 months, what have those months looked like?
The greatest disruption in aviation history.
Very good. I mean, not very good, but very good answer. And then we'll go to Deanna. What have the last months looked like for you?
Thank you. Echoing Justin's response, I would add, it's been a wild ride.
Okay. Dr. Chi.
I'll give you 2 numbers, 2 versus 80. Pre-pandemic, we were operating 80 flights between the US and China. Now we're operating 2.
And Janet.
Sadly, absolutely 0 travel for any groups that we had planned. I'm not going over 5 there, Catherine.
Okay. So now I'd like to ask you a similar question about the future. What do you see ahead? It's difficult to know because, again, the situation is changing moment to moment. But again, short answers will be helpful, and then we can get to some of the bigger questions. Justin, again, I'll start with you.
Yeah, they will see a huge transformation of the passenger journey.
Okay. Deanna?
After 16 months of zero revenue when the industry was shut down, I'd say we are looking forward with optimism.
And Dr. Chi?
Last time when I spoke on this panel, I mean, not this panel, but at LA Road Affairs Council, I sounded struck a very optimistic tone. And in fact, I was a little pessimistic, it turned out. So our business, the industry has coming roaring back. And I think it will continue to come back more strongly.
Okay. And Janet?
I think that travel, the love of travel is so deep in our psyche that this period where we haven't been able to travel freely will result in a huge demand. So we had hoped that would start now, but we have to push that back. I'm optimistic that 2022 is going to, rebound big time.
To Janet's point, Longwoods International, which has been following the pandemic since the start and surveying every 2 weeks, a week ago put out statistics that said that 1/3 of Americans are now concerned about how COVID will affect their travel plans. That's up from about 21% 2 weeks before that. So we can see that the public is concerned about this. I think besides the COVID issue, the number of changes that we've seen within each of these segments has been enormous. And so I would like to ask each of you within your specialties to briefly describe the biggest changes your customers will face as travel starts to come back, as it is coming back. I'm not going to limit you to 5 words, but we want to make sure that we get to all of the questions, including those from the audience. So Justin, I'm going to start with you again.
I think the biggest change is that passengers need to plan and prepare a lot more than they did in the past. There's a lot of restrictions out there, so depending upon where you're going, passengers are going to have to do some research about what they need to do to prepare, whether they need to have a negative COVID test or a vaccination, who they need, what type of proof do they need, who do they need to give that proof to, what are the requirements at the airport that you're leaving from, what are the requirements at the airport you're arriving at. So there's a lot more preparation that passengers need to do than in the past for traveling in this era. So I think that's probably the biggest change right now.
Deanna, tell us about the cruise industry. What will we see that's different besides everything?
Sure. So we are continuing to operate vaccinated cruises as the definition is given by the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control. And then in an abundance of caution and in response to the increasing number of cases from the Delta variant, a week ago, we added that all guests are going to be required to wear masks indoors in the elevators, the retail shops, in the casinos, an example, and some other areas. And even when they're not eating or drinking in some of the restaurants. So masking is generally now being considered or recommended around the US, and we tend to follow whatever the protocols are of the state we sail from, or the US, of course, and the WHO recommendations. And in addition, just yesterday, we instituted a pre-cruise testing requirement even for vaccinated guests. So everyone must show proof of a negative medically observed COVID-19 test and taken within 3 days of embarkation. And even though we run these vaccinated cruises per the CDC, we still require all of our guests and crew as well to be tested before boarding, and particularly with our crew periodically throughout the cruise.
Dr. Chi, what are some of the biggest changes that your customers or passengers will see?
Well, I would say over the years, beginning with, for example, 9/11, there has been added layers and layers of complexity, and this is no exception. Well, the pandemic, we consider it an exception, but it will result in more complexity, just as Justin pointed out. There needs to be a lot more planning. There will probably be a little more anxiety, a little more complexity. I remember the days when we were trying to blow up the biggest obstacle between in travel between the U.S. and China, which was the visa issue. We successfully dealt with that, and now more restrictions are put in. So we need to figure out a way to make the passenger's journey a little smoother. So today, if you travel to China, you need to be quarantined for at least 14 days, and if not 21 days. And you need to present all kinds of evidence, health evidence. So it's going to be a completely changed world. I think what's happening right now is a little bit, the response is a little bit spontaneous, but then I think it will be eternalized and formalized in international travel, vaccine passport or not. So that's what I think is going to be happening, and then it will take quite a bit of ingenuity on our part to figure out solutions to make air travel, especially international travel, a little more manageable for our customers.
Janet, Distant Horizons has always specialized in off the beaten track, if you will, destinations. What do you see as ahead for your business and that person who really wants to see things that are not on standard tours?
I mean, in addition to the regulations that have been discussed, the vaccination, requiring the test results, I see various trends. One, and this may be counterintuitive to some of the listeners here, I think the cost of travel is going to go up. There's somehow this myth that, there's such, everybody's suffering so much, the hotels, the airlines are going to bring in cheap airfares, cheap hotel rates. No, that's not going to happen. I think, the cost of providing travel has gone up. So no cheap deals, I foresee. But I think that there's some good that's come out of this. I mean, if we look for the silver lining, I think a lot of us have been forced to slow down and look at our product. And I believe that I certainly feel that a lot of us are thinking, how can we make our programs more inclusive? How can we connect with communities, local communities? How can we support minority businesses? I think that what I see is a quality over quantity in terms of group travel. I see smaller group sizes, and I think that's a plus in terms of quality of programming. I see a pleasure in planning travel. We sort of lost that a little bit. We were all moving at such a fast pace that a lot of the beauty of travel is thinking about travel. It's about planning. It's about choosing where you're going to stay, who you're going to visit with. So I think a lot of that, I'm optimistic will come back. And we have specialized in off the beaten track destinations, and I believe those destinations will have more appeal. They are more remote. There are less people in them, less people wanting to go there. So it's been a very tough 16, 17 months, but I think that a lot of us in the business have worked out how to make it more pleasurable to travel. What can we do to increase the quality of the product that we're providing?
Great. Justin, I want to ask about LAX. Many of us haven't traveled in the last 17 months, and yet things have not remained static at LAX. Can you update us on the infrastructure project at LAX and tell us what changes passengers will see that are pretty obvious since you've been working through this pandemic on that project?
Yeah, one of the most important things that we tried to make sure that we were able to continue with during this pandemic was all of our infrastructure projects. So we have a $14.5 billion capital improvement program going on here, where we're revolutionizing the way people access the airport, and also we're building new facilities and improving existing facilities. So if you haven't been to LAX recently, literally you will have, when you come here, you'll see that things have kind of sprouted out of the ground. The guideway of our automated people mover train is almost completely visible for the entire route. And that's a lot of progress been made on that. Likewise, our consolidated rental car facility, which is going to be the biggest in the world and the second largest concrete structure in the United States, is pretty much done with pouring the concrete. So you could see that structure in place. We're going to be opening our intermodal transportation facility, which is a remote parking lot and a remote curb, in just a couple of months to provide more access for people who are going to park here. And then we already opened 2 facilities this year, our West Gates, which is additional gates at Tom Bradley International Terminal, a beautiful new facility, state of the art. It's getting rave reviews, as well as a Terminal 1 extension that provides additional processing for passengers, but also provides the first terminal vertical core that will connect with our people mover and the pedestrian bridge across that. So we've made great progress in our projects. We have Terminal 2 and 3 being modernized, and that'll be, the first parts will be done next year. Terminal 4 and 5 are being modernized, Terminal 6 being modernized, and we have an environmental document out on the street right now for further improvements to our airfield and to our roadways, and to some 2 additional terminals to help us to meet the future volumes that will come to our airports. A lot of things going on here, and very excited about the future here and what those new infrastructure projects will bring.
One of the things about the future of travel is that LAX is really going to touchless travel. Can you describe that, what that means for the passengers, and talk about what they should expect and whether these things will continue to change?
Absolutely. We were already moving towards a path of self-service and touchless travel before the pandemic. And the pandemic actually helped us to accelerate a lot of our activities and get a lot of the partners that we have to work with to accelerate their look into this area. So the idea is that passengers, before they even come to the airport, would be able to plan out and many times actually reserve aspects of their journey before they even get here. And so one of the things that we're implementing right now is a smart parking solution, which will allow you to pretty much go in and prepay and potentially reserve a parking space. So all you have to do is pull up and the gate will open automatically. And then when you leave, it'll close, it'll open automatically, and then it will charge your credit card in the background. We have a solution now for security, where now everybody uses this new technology called CAT technology, where you only have to insert your ID into a machine. You don't have to exchange documents with the TSA agent. We have an Order Now application that allows you to order online food and beverage, either before you get to the airport or when you're here, and then just pick it up at the concession, pay for it on your phone without any transaction required at the concession stand. And also in some terminals, you can actually have it delivered to your gate. And we have biometric boarding for your planes. So some international flights are allowing boarding with just your face. You don't need to have your passport or your boarding pass. And then when people are returning from overseas, CBP has all biometric being used so that passengers can have a very much more expeditious immigration process, but also a contactless one, because they don't have to exchange passports and visa documentation necessarily. A lot of stuff, and we'll be continuing to improve on that journey going forward.
It sounds very futuristic, but it sounds like the future is actually here, or will be very shortly. Deanna, your ships are slowly returning to service, or returning to service. although you mentioned earlier that your fleet is smaller. Can you tell us what it's like? What is it like to cruise now? What kinds of things will people see that are different about the cruising, and in some cases better? And what's ahead?
Sure, thank you. I would say that while the pandemic has forever changed everyone's awareness of public health issues, we continue to learn and respond as the months progress. And so beyond that, the pandemic has really resulted in accelerating our ability for touchless and frictionless efforts for the guests, for the cruise experience. So we had invested in some technology a few years ago that has now come to fruition in ways that we had not even imagined then, such as the ability for contact tracing and things that now we need, and our systems on board allow us to do that. So there is a small wearable device, it's about the size of a quarter, and you can keep it in your pocket or wear it on your wrist or whatever. And what it does is it allows us to provide touchless check-in, for example. More services are available via apps or on touch screens around the ship, or you don't have to touch. If you have your device with you, it knows you and it recognizes you, and you can interact with it. So this wearable device, it replaces the traditional cruise card that if you've ever cruised, you may have gotten a cruise card in the past. And now with this innovative technology, we can significantly expand all of the touch-free experiences and personalization. So as I mentioned, touchless embarkation, you get there, you have done all of your pre-cruise health screenings, your testing, etc. So you can touchless embark and disembark the ship. There's keyless stateroom entry to your cabin, completely contactless commerce, and so as well as a variety of other entertainment and gaming capabilities on your stateroom TV, on your phone, or even on deck with our big movies under the stars screens where you can interact personally. So what it has really done is enhance the ability for contactless experiences, as well as enhancing those for the guests. And one other thing I might add is that this technology also allows the guests to contact our crew at any time if they have a need or a question. They no longer stand in lines like many other cruise lines today. They can go anywhere. They can go to the lobby, they can be in their stateroom, and they can chat with the crew member, tell them what they need or what their question is, and have it answered. So no more lines in the public spaces. So there's a variety of benefits that have really enhanced the cruise experience and also freed up our crew so that they can spend more time with the guests providing personalized service. So it is quite a different experience that you would see on board today versus where we were when we stopped sailing in March of 2020.
March of 2020 seems like a long, long time ago, yet we're looking ahead to 2022. Can you tell us again how the industry you think will change and morph as we begin to look at the beginning of another year, a full year, I hope, of cruising?
Right. So the future is really bright for the cruise industry. So far, we have all, as an industry, been very well managed the return of the fleet. So there's only one ship or two ships. Princess has one ship in the water right now in Alaska and another one in the UK as an example. So we have 14 ships and only 2 are sailing right now. And the rest of the industry is doing similar. So they just have a small number of ships so we can learn, we can understand what's working, how to improve the guest experience, and also the safety, health, and welfare of our guests and crew, which is our number one, as always, goal. And so going into the future, there is really strong demand. People want to go on vacation, as others have said previously in this discussion. And we can see that Alaska, Caribbean, Europe, all of our destinations are booking very well for 2022. So we just need to bide our time, you know, get through this Delta variant and be ready for the demand that's going to ensue as people feel more comfortable traveling and the Delta variant is contained and managed.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Chi, I want to talk to you a little bit, or would like you to talk to our audience here about how air travel has changed. What will passengers see in regard to health and safety? Because obviously that is a huge emphasis these days in air travel. How is it different?
I think we need to divide it up into two different worlds: domestic travel versus international travel. Domestic, I think it's been coming back pretty strongly, and domestic airlines, they have instituted many measures. I think a very controversial one is probably wearing a mask, and we see a lot of reporting on disruptions and whatnot. But by and large, it's been going very well, in my opinion. You know, credit to our industry. Internationally, I think it's a completely different ballgame. It's not up to the industry. It needs governments around the world to work together to come up with certain schemes so that there's some sort of standardization between amongst all the countries in the world. That has not happened, and that's still a long way to come. And so if we just look at travel from from the US to China, for example, I mean, as far as this audience is concerned, I will say it is very challenging. A number of things. I mean, number one, both US and China placed travel bans on each other. And so normally you're not allowed to go to China. So today, if you want to go to China, even though you have a valid visa, by the way, which was a fight we participated in vigorously 10 years ago. So now 10 years visas are extended to both to the citizens of both countries. But those visas are now suspended. So if you want to go to China, the first thing you need to do is to come up with a valid reason, a very strong reason. The policy that the Chinese consulates and embassy will tell you is, unless it is urgent, unless it is absolutely necessary, please do not travel. And so for you to travel, you will need to, first thing you need to do is to get a very special visa or special visa. And then you need to go through all the tests and present all the evidence that you can think of. And so, and then you actually get that from the Chinese consulate. And once you're on the ground, you need to be quarantined for 14 days or 21 days, and it's not easy. And even if you travel as a couple, you will need to be quarantined separately. And unless you travel with a kid who is younger than, I want to say, I don't quite remember the age limit, but so for example, if you're traveling with your child who is 12 years old, then yeah, you're in luck, and you two can be quarantined in the same room. And so it's, but I will say the onboard experience is pretty straightforward. I think to the credit of our industry, we've done a pretty good job. And so far, I challenge anybody to come up with any evidence that pandemic, there's any transmission of the virus on board airplanes. I quite frankly, personally, I have not seen that. I think the airlines have done a great job of disinfection and taking measures. Protecting the crews, protecting the passengers, and I do see, and also our industry when it comes to the airlines, a lot of it is on the ground experience. Quite frankly, I mean, you go to the airport, you get well, first of all, you get a visa, you get all the documentation, and then you go to the airport. The airport is a huge part of the journey, and I'm so happy to hear Justin talk about all the things that that have been happening at LAX. In fact, a couple of years ago, he and I sat down, and I wanted to join some of the programs he's putting together, and but we'll continue to see innovations. And right now, as I said, the onboard experience is, I would say, knock on wood, pretty safe. And but we're going to try to go touchless as well. For example, if passengers can use the bathroom touchless in a touchless manner, and people are actually doing that. Airlines are actually studying that and even implementing solutions. So I will say it is going to be a changed world as far as international travel is, and it is quite a ways, I will say, from coming back to normal. But eventually it will, and there's zero doubt in my mind that international travel will come back. I mean, people need to go to China to visit their parents and relatives, family, and then also students need to go back and forth, and then business people. Harvard University did a study. Without business travel, commerce will not, will not function. So business travel will also have to come back. You do need to sit down and break bread and drink some alcohol with people in order to do business.
I'm always in favor of breaking bread and drinking alcohol, Dr. Chi. Thank you. Janet, your business has specialized in unique trips that you just don't see everywhere, and some of those have not been possible. But you've talked about developing. Earlier, you mentioned new products, and can you talk a little bit about how you are trying to coordinate what you do with what the public is comfortable doing? You have some domestic travel as well. Not everything is far flung. So tell us what you're doing in order to accommodate the traveling public.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as a broad response to that question, our biggest challenge right now is dealing with a culture of fear. I mean, I think when it comes down to it, what's stopping people from travel, especially group travel, is fear. It's fear of what might happen, and the media has not helped. In many ways, I'm grateful for the media coverage because I think it is encouraging people to get vaccinated, and that is a good aspect of fear. But so that's our challenge, and how we're trying to meet that challenge is by developing product where people will feel safer. Prior to COVID, as it happens, we had been looking at more domestic programs. I mean, we have a wonderful civil rights program that's in the South, of course, and the South, as we know, is doing horribly right now in terms of COVID. So sadly, last week, we've been watching people cancel off those programs. We have a very interesting Native American program in the Dakotas looking at indigenous history and contemporary life for on and off reservations. That is doing, touch wood, that we still have that in place. And I think, again, it's this concept of what the average traveler is comfortable with, being in the Dakotas, being outside. That is just more comforting to someone who's looking at the risk. But we're also experimenting right now. I mentioned this to you last week on a food production program in Northern California. We all take for granted that California's the food basket of the United States and even beyond the United States. But how much do we know about what goes on in California? How much do we know about how that food is produced, who's producing it, who's owning the land, the water issues, the fire issues? There's a lot of interesting questions, and we thought, why not design a program for Californians where they can join us starting in Sacramento in their cars. They don't have to necessarily fly. The program is going to be Sacramento, Salinas, and then the Central Valley around Fresno. and people can come in their own cars, and we think that will provide a comfort level. And again, it's harder in my industry, in the group travel industry. I hear you talking about the touchless, and that's difficult. When you're sitting down at a restaurant, you got to eat. Yes, we can incorporate social distancing. We can work with our hotels. Certain hotel chains, the Marriott Bonvoy has done a fantastic job of touchless keys. But it's kind of the antithesis of what we're trying to create. We want people to connect with each other. We want to connect with local communities. So I'm not sure we can bring a lot of touchless aspect to our programs, but we can think about what the traveling public is comfortable with and create programming that will kind of, at least hate their fears. And I do, a lot of what all of us have seen in this is just fear. And it's just making people feel comfortable again. And if we can get LAX to be as Justin's describing, and the cruises and the airline experience, I think gradually it will come back. And as I said earlier, it is deep in our psyche to want to travel, to want to experience new things. And that will come back. It's going to come back. It's going to come back strong. I'm a little scared about how strong it is going to come back. I think we're going to go from having, basically a feast and famine situation where we've had nothing to how are we going to manage the demand when it does come back. We're ready for it. We'll deal with it. I will not be complaining, but
I'm going to hold you to that.
I think that's what we're going to be seeing.
I think you nailed it when you said culture of fear, and I want to ask generally. I think that one of the biggest ways that we could combat this culture of fear is with information. And because things change so rapidly, sometimes on a minute-to-minute basis, and I want to start with you, Janet. What are some of the sources of information that you recommend that your travelers look to in order to make sure that they are in line with the most current recommendations and requirements? What do you look at yourself?
I mean, I can tell you one thing, I don't look at one source. I mean, I absolutely do not do that because it's changing so frequently that I actually found recently that the State Department, who have wonderful access and sites, were inaccurate about a situation in Morocco. I was absolutely shocked that they had not updated it. So I think the CDC for sure. I mean, they're the ones who are giving the rankings, 1 to 4 as how much of an issue COVID is in each country. So the CDC, for sure, the State Department. And then, I'm signed up to probably 5 different blogs where these are people who are monitoring things. So like when Hawaii changed their regulations on Friday, I got it immediately. So I think signing up for news alerts, CDC, yes, State Department, and just, basically understanding that there's not one single source, but it is unbelievably complicated. I mean, it literally is. It does change from day to day, day to day.
Yep, we're all sitting here nodding our heads. Justin, I want to ask you, for the most current information on LAX in a micro sense, and for flying in general in a macro sense, what sources of information do you recommend for people?
Well, there are, I fully agree with Janet. You have to go on your journey, but certainly our website, we try to keep it as up to date as possible, and that's www.flylax.com/travel safely. To give you much information about traveling safely, and then connecting you with the proper sites to get information. Certainly, your airline, the flying, the airline site is very important to go to. The airline sites have a lot of information around what you need to travel and where you can get information. It's always good to visit the country, if you're traveling internationally, the country where you're going to, their website to see what restrictions might exist there. So multiple places to go, and then of course you need information on where to get testing and vaccinations. We offer both of those here at LAX, but you might want to try to find a place closer to your house. You have to make sure that where you're getting your testing from is the proper test for the destination that you're going to. So there's a lot of sites that you need to visit.
Dr. Chi, the situation for travel between the United States and China is dire at the moment, but that will change obviously at some point. Where should people look to find the most recent information and to figure out when they can finally go back to China?
So first of all, I want to offer my compliment to Janet, and she's absolutely right. I think the cost of travel is going to go up, not just monetary travel, but the cost of getting information is pretty high. And talking about the fear, I think that's a much more complicated issue. You do need to go to different sources to get information because different sources, they all have their own, have an axe to grind, shall we say. But when it comes to travel internationally, I think it's fairly straightforward. Totally agree with Justin. If you know which airline you're going to fly on, hopefully it's going to be Air China. You just call us or visit our website. There is a wealth of information. I would say the number one priority these days for airlines is to make our passengers' journeys safe. And so we work so hard to keep our website and keep all the information updated. And so that's number one. I mean, our people have become experts on the restrictions, unfortunately, and on what you should do to navigate those very complicated, complex restrictions. And the second most important thing, source of information would be for example, if you travel to China, you would need to. I would highly encourage you to visit the websites of Chinese consulates and Chinese embassy. They also do a great job of updating travelers on what is needed. And in the order, next on the list probably would be State Department website. They will tell you, which country is on the amber list, which country is on the green list, and blah blah blah. So, as I said, travel is going to get a little expensive in that. I mean, there's a cost of not just monetary cost, but also the cost of securing and obtaining information.
Thank you. Deanna, I would assume that Princess website is the place to go for anything Princess related on a micro sense. What kinds of information will you find there, and what other kind of cruise information, what other places can you look to see what the most current thinking on cruises is, or the most current news?
Thank you. As Janet and others said, definitely I would recommend going to the CDC, Centers for Disease Control website, also the WHO, the World Health Organization, to keep updated more generally on the latest levels of travel guidance. And you can sign up for updates to be delivered directly to you by those sources, by the CDC and the WHO. Yes, we have created a hub on our website on princess.com, and we call it our Cruise Health section, and it provides steps to enhance the public health. So we direct our guests and our travel advisors there because we regularly update it, and as we previously have said, it changes every day, every week. So we are very committed to keeping it up to date with the evolving protocols. And we also communicate directly with our guests when things change, and the travel agent community with regular outreach to them to ensure that they remain informed and aligned as well. As a company, we've always been committed, and our highest responsibilities are for caring for our guests, our teammates, compliance with all of the requirements, the health and safety and well-being of all of our guests, the environment as well, and the communities that we visit. So this is all part of our core values and our shared purpose. And I did want to mention that even though we had very strong health protocols in place prior to the pandemic, we have added the others that I mentioned for part of our return to service through the end of this year. And the way we helped our crew out recently was by providing vaccinations for them. And in fact, in collaboration with the Port of Los Angeles, in the Los Angeles County of Health and other partners helped us to vaccinate all of our crew for Majestic Princess several months ago before she went into operation for Alaska. So we've really reached out to our partners and worked well with them and them with us in order to provide a very safe cruise experience.
Thank you. And finally, before we get to questions from listeners, I just want to ask you, what is the one thing you would tell those considering traveling on your airline, through LAX, on a cruise, on a group tour? What would you tell them besides keep calm and carry on? And in the case of airlines, stop misbehaving, because that's more than annoying. It's a federal crime. What would you tell them? Justin, I'm going to start with you. What would you tell people about travel and air travel in particular and the airport experience?
Yeah, many people haven't traveled in a long time, and so it's very important that they prepare properly. Research, plan, prepare, and be patient. There is a lot of anxiety out there. People are very anxious when they're traveling now because of the changes, because of the health concerns, because they've tried to follow the rules, because of the political environment. Everything is adding up to people being very anxious, and you just need to be patient, because it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be like it was before. So you just have to, kind of plan and be patient. That's the best advice I can give.
Deanna, what's your one pearl of advice that you would share?
You won't regret it.
Great.
I would say that because 16 months ago, some of the ships were in the news with spreading of COVID, that we need to regain the support and confidence of our guests. And my advice is that it is very safe, and we have learned a lot, and the cruise is now a very well managed place to be. So as COVID occurs all around the world, and you need to think about the environment you're entering into, and to have the confidence that, at least for Princess and from Carnival Corporation, all 9 of our brands, that we are taking care of you. We have instituted the highest protocols. We have measures in place such that if there are 1 or 2 cases on board, there's isolation cabins. And as you can see from other cruise lines that have already restarted, where they have had a few cases on board out of 3,000 people, let's say, they are quite well contained. There is no spread. We all have gotten all of our protocols agreed by the CDC. And so you can rest assured and with full confidence that when you take a cruise, we are making sure that it is as safe as possible, with all of the crew vaccinated, nearly all of the guests vaccinated. And it is a great experience to once again return to.
Dr. Chi, what one brief bit of advice would you give to travelers?
Well, as I said, domestic and international are 2 different worlds. So when it comes to international, I will say, number 1, take your time. And number 2, be mentally prepared. And number 3, be very patient. And you're gonna experience things that you never thought you would. So those would be the advice I would give.
And Janet?
Yeah, apologies. I thought you had called on me earlier, so I didn't mean to step on. Yes, as I said, I mean, yes, patient, but I think that hopefully the listening audience will understand that everybody here is doing everything they possibly can to ensure your safety. And so go forward, enjoy. You won't regret it.
Jessica, I think it is time to turn this over to you and to see if there's
Yes.
some audience questions.
We have a lot of questions, so if you guys don't mind keeping your question or your answers short, that would be great because we only have about 10 minutes left in the session. But before we launch into the Q&A session, I just wanted to thank our viewers for your continued support. We depend upon your donations to cover our expenses so that we can continue to bring you these important discussions. So if you are able to make a donation, please go to our website, lawacth.org, and click on the donate button. We greatly appreciate your support. This first question for you, Dr. Chi. CAPA made a prediction last month that corporate travel policy for long-haul international travel will possibly shift to premium economy travel policies, possibly downgrading existing business class travel and possibly upgrading for economy class travel policies. Do you agree with that general thought? If so, are there many different airline definitions of exactly what premium economy is, and how should airlines align their product with that prediction?
I mean, I'm not surprised by that prediction, but it happened a long time ago. It didn't virtually has, I would say virtually has nothing to do with the pandemic. And the corporations are always trying to find ways to reduce their cost. And so that's no surprise. And I will say the jury is still out on that. On the one hand, travel in business class is quite expensive. Well, depending on the time of year and depending, I mean, there are many factors, but in general, I would agree that for corporations to find ways to reduce their travel expenses, yes, they would want to see some product that it's in between a luxury experience in business class and I would say not so comfortable experience in coach, and quite frankly, the trend was already beginning to show before the pandemic. But I'm not sure the pandemic will actually add to that. That I would I think it's still to be seen.
For Justin, one of the challenges is access and egress to the terminal loop by automobiles. Having mass transit will be a huge improvement, but will anything be done about or redesigned regarding the surrounding and internal roadways?
Yes, we are transforming the way that people access the central terminal area and the airport in general. So it starts with our automated people mover train, which will connect with the metro and also connect with the consolidated rental car facility and remote parking to take a lot of those buses out of the central terminal area and leave a lot more room for private vehicles, but also allow people to take the public transportation to get to the airport, which hopefully will alleviate a lot of the cars that cause congestion there. And then I mentioned also the environmental document that we have out there. And one component of this is a new set of elevated roadways that will change the way that people drive into and out of the central terminal area today. And it will help to significantly alleviate the congestion that you see today when you're driving into and out of LAX. So really looking forward to both of those, and they will literally transform the way people get in and out of LAX.
And Deanna, what will the cruise industry do at US ports that are forbidding virus or mask requirements for embarkation?
So we are working with, I believe this is Florida that you're referring to right now. And it is an interesting situation that continues to evolve between the governor of Florida and the CDC. And we are biding our time actually right now because we don't have a ship that's going to sail out of Florida until November. So we're hoping that this will be clarified. But what is occurring right now with the state of Florida, where they're not allowing the cruise lines to ask guests if they are vaccinated, there are other things that some of the other brands are doing, such as you don't have to tell them whether or not you're vaccinated. However, if you don't tell them, then you are considered unvaccinated, and therefore you follow the protocols on board the ship for unvaccinated crew, for unvaccinated guests. And those procedures are much more rigorous and wearing masks all the time, being on only organized shore excursions to go ashore, and also paying extra money because of all the extra fees that we need to pay in each port to have all of the administrative reporting done. So it ends up being that it is unfortunately, an expensive and not as good of an experience in those ports if you're not vaccinated. So we can't necessarily require it, although some cruise lines are trying to require it. It's just been a very difficult situation there that we're hoping we can work through in the coming weeks.
Thank you. Janet, I'll direct this question to you. This questioner says, I have traveled on land tours with Distant Horizons at least twice, as have many people from the council. We have done trips to Cuba with you, to Iran, Eastern Europe. We usually do our DC trips, which we're hoping to start up again in 2022 and possibly do a Saudi Arabia tour next year, assuming everything opens up. So to our audience, if you're interested in travel with us, let me know. What is happening regarding buffets, plated servings, bus size for number of participants? Does a single have to pair up with a stranger, group size, etc.? Please discuss the international land tour experience.
So, it's ever changing. It's ever changing. But let me address a couple of the points that you brought up. First of all, I think that certainly all my partners in this industry, in terms of land cruises, we're looking at land programs. We're looking at smaller numbers. So smaller numbers, larger buses, we're looking at 20 people in 56-seater buses, which I think will mitigate some of this fear. Most hotels and restaurants that we're working with are not doing buffets, or if they're doing buffets, it's you choose what you want and someone serves it to you on a plate. It's no self-service, but a lot of the buffets have gone completely. Let's see what else. What were the other ones? It was the group size, the buffets,
the bus, and then also pairing up single travelers with another single traveler.
Right. So one of the things that we are doing is we are requiring that people are vaccinated. So therefore, if you are going to room with a stranger, that would be a choice that you made. You obviously wouldn't have to. You can always get a single room and pay the single room supplement. But if you were to choose to room with somebody, it would be somebody who had been vaccinated. So again, we're hoping we can. You'll never eradicate fear, but you can mitigate the opportunities, I hope. We're confident that with a smaller group size and taking into account the other adjustments that we can make, that we can provide safe travel. I mean, there's always risk. There's risk in everything we do. So it is a question of mitigating that risk.
Thank you.
Love working with the LA World Affairs Council and Town Hall, and look forward to more travel opportunities in the years to come.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. Dr. Chi, we know China and the US have allowed Chinese students back as international students to the US universities. When do you see China opening its borders for business travel? And is China requiring vaccinations as well for Chinese citizens?
For Chinese citizens to leave China, or for Chinese citizens?
Sorry, are Chinese citizens being required to vaccinate, and when will China open back up for business travel?
Last I heard, I don't think it's a requirement, but it is. But everybody is highly encouraged to get vaccinated. So that's the answer to your first question. And then what's your second question? You were saying business people travel to China?
Yeah, so the universities are allowing Chinese students to come back to the US as international students, but when will China open its borders for business travel?
That is a very hard question to answer, by the way. I mean, there are so many issues. Again, both countries imposed travel bans on the other side. And I think the US decided to open it up to students. So far, business travel is still not on the allowed list. I think it's going to take some give and take. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some many conversations for business travel to be again allowed between the two countries. But even today, I believe there are ways to get around that, although there are very, very difficult ways. For example, for a Chinese business person to come to the United States, all he or she needs to do is to fly to Mexico and spend 14 days in Mexico, and then they can come in hassle-free to the United States. But again, that's a very high price to pay. I will say between the U.S. and China, if from China's perspective, my guess is if any country is going to be allowed, I think the U.S. is probably very, very high on the list. So that's a silver lining.
Right. All right, and I know we're out of time. But Justin, if I can just ask one final question to you, what's your advice on domestic air travel to visit my family on the opposite coast? Is it best not to travel if not necessary? Or is it low risk if vaccinated, mask-wearing passenger traveled?
So that's a question that each person has to identify on their own. But I would say that travel between the airlines and the airports, we have done everything we possibly can to make your journey as safe and as healthy as possible. So I would not be worried about the state of the airport or the condition in aircraft for traveling. And certainly if you're the best way to avoid getting ill and contracting a virus is to get vaccinated. And not only will you avoid getting the virus, but even in the odd chance that you do, the very rare chance that you do, it will significantly reduce the symptoms and the extent of the virus for you. So yes, it's safe to travel, but please do go out and get vaccinated.